Here we go. Recording has started. And once again, our disclaimer, this call is being recorded and we place our recording on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. So thank you for joining. Once again, just want to give a heads up. There won't be any session next week. It's spring break in the US where I live, and I'm taking off, and I could find a presenter for next week. So next week we will be off. Okay, so with that, um, our topic of discussion today is App Service Environment v3, some of the updates. We have talked about App Service Environment a few times, and today we are going to be discussing two major updates. One is about migration, how you can migrate from previous version to the new one, and this is currently in public preview. And the second one is about the private endpoint connectivity. To address some of the customer scenario, and we'll talk about it as well. So first of all, as we always do, we do a quick level set on the main topic, which is App Service Environment v3 in 1 or 2 minutes, and then we will go into topics. And of course, we will have some slides and demo and all. And please feel free to ask question if you have any. So first of all, what is App Service Environment? App Service Environment is, as you know, Microsoft um, platform as a service piece, which basically allows you to host it inside your own virtual network. So it is, think of it as an isolated app service environment. You have a multi-tenant app service environment where your app may be running with next to other customers' app. There is logical isolation, but this one provides further isolation, deploying it in your own network. We have it's in third iteration. We have app service one, app service environment two, and this one is app service environment three, which is had made significant enhancement. Basically, all of the management traffic of app service environment is now hauled on a separate network, which allows you to completely lock down your app service environment. So if you are using it in your organization and all the apps that you're hosting are only accessed by your internal employees or consumers, and there is no external access needed, you can deploy an internal instance and non-public internal instance, and then all lock down all external access, and that's it. You don't need to do, won't be any outbound traffic unless until you meant to do that, and you can use firewall or NSGs for that. So one of the big customer ask was customers have made significant investments in app service environments, uh, V2, and especially in V2, and they wanted something, a way to move forward without basically kind of a manually moving this app. So there is currently in public preview the ability to migrate to app service environment V3. And right now, the supported scenario is you should have either you can have an ILB, which is internal load balancer, or external load balancer based app service environment V2. You can migrate it to V3. Okay. It is supported in the following region at the moment, since it's in public preview. So these are the only, if you want to try it out, you can, spin up those instances, play with it, see how it goes. So these are the regions that you can test them out. In regards to limitation, just keep in mind, limitations are going to be whatever there are on V3. So we know, I'm pretty sure if you have attended the previous sessions, SMTP traffic, there are, like deploying your app with FTP. These are some of the things that are not yet available on V3. So those are the same things pretty much that are limitations. So if you're moving from V2 to V3, you're going to come across these. Any questions so far? So let's talk about a few more things. one thing I just want to mention. Um, yeah, so one thing I want to mention here that is key is there is no support for V1 to V3. And you cannot go from V2 to a V3 based zone redundant environment. So if you have a V2, you want to take advantage of zone redundancy in V3, you have to think about other ways of doing it. Okay. And with I'm not going to just go through the list, just go through, read the slide, but you can get an idea what is supported and what is not based on this deck. And we don't know. I mean, maybe after preview, some of the restriction go away. Maybe they remain. Uh, I'm not privy of to that information. But just one thing I definitely want to mention, just like in any migration scenario, um, we have to follow the best practices. Like if you are moving a or migrating an app that is an app service environment that is on V2 to V3, probably you want to do a dry run, create that environment in a dev test, migrate it, see if there you would come across any issues, and maybe do it a few times before you actually do the production migration. So those best practices still remain, but the good thing is there is a way, and you will look in the demo that I will show a small demo, how it is the step-by-step processes, and you can do it from the portal as well as through CLI. Of course, I will show it what are the steps in the portal, and CLI steps are kind of a similar, but they allow you to do it through a script. Okay. Any question before we jump into a demo? Okay, so here is what I have. I have this resource group here. Let me increase the font size a little bit. Okay, I hope everybody can see it. Okay, so this is, I have a resource group and I have a V2 ACE that I have deployed in Canada Central since, the migration is supported over there. So once this page refreshes, you see there is an option, migrate to app service V3, and it allows you to kind of take a step through this migration and do it. So let's click on it. And that's what I like. I mean, all the steps are outlined. What is happening there is kind of it's providing you a lot more information. So the first step would be, and this is once again, it's not intrusive. This will take care of the new IP addresses for your app service environment. Okay. And by the way, just keep in mind, this is in place migration. So this will be kind of converting your ACE V2 to V3. Okay. So that would be an IP address. It will create the new IP address. It will take 15 minutes. And once you start it, we are not going to actually do it since we don't have time, but just to give you an idea, I just want to go over the steps. The second step that will basically is the delegation, um, of the IP addresses. I mean, at the moment, if somebody is locking on the IP address of your ACE, you may wanna like setting up their firewall based on your ACE IP address. You may wanna update them, things like that. And this will basically, delegate your subnet to the hosting environment. Okay, that step. The third step is the main migration step. This is where your application will be offline. Your environment will be shut down. It will convert your SKU from isolated to isolated V2. Remember, ACE V2 uses isolated SKU, and ACE V3 uses isolated V2. So the SKU will change, and with that, of course, there may be some pricing kind of changes. But what I have seen so far is ASV3 has kind of a more economical to run than ASV2 since there is no charge for kind of a running for the support infrastructure that was, they're charged just running the AS. There's no charge for that. Um, so, and they talk about like an hour or so downtime. But once again, this is the main migration step. So once you do that step, that kind of and it kind of goes through its course, then your migration will be complete. But to give you an idea, all of these steps are outlined. You can use Portal or you can use CLI. This is in public preview. So if you have a customer, you are using ASV2, looking to move to ASV3, of course, there are multiple ways you can move your application, but this is one option, definitely, that you can take advantage of for migrating your app from, um, V2 to V3. Any questions, folks? Okay, that's perfect. So let's go on to the second piece that we're going to talk about. So it's kind of I call it a hidden feature founded by kind of if you look through the document, you will be able to see there is now support for private endpoint in app service environment v3. Okay, so as I said before, app service environment v3 um, or app service environment in general is an isolated app service instance deployed, injected in your VNet. And there are two flavors to it. You have internal load balancer or internal, where you only, there is no public IP, it's all private. There's a private endpoint, and that's how you access your web application. And then there is an external where you have a public IP and you access it through publicly over the internet. Okay. Some customers, um, they have certain requirements where they may have a um, public deployment, but they want to access certain apps over a private IP address. So they have a mix of apps. Some apps may be running for external customer. Some app they want to access internally for their internal consumer. They don't want to expose those apps externally. Okay, that's one scenario. Second is in some uh, large customer who are kind of for their certain security, privacy, and compliance requirement, they don't have their VNets where their apps are deployed or app service environment is deployed connected to on-prem using Express Route. They use private connectivity to go back and forth. So they have like think of it as a firewall environment or a kind of a bastion that is connected to on-prem, and the connection both ways is not express route or peering. It is private endpoint. So any service that any application that need to consume a service running in this Azure workload VNet, it needs to create a private endpoint to it, um, and then vice versa. Okay, so in those scenario, you have an app service environment. How you this they want to have the best of both worlds. They don't want to use the multi-tenant environment, create private endpoints. They want an isolated instance, but they want to access it through private IP. As you may know, if you create an app service environment private, you only get one IP address, and that is not, you cannot create private endpoint on top of it. But with public um, uh, uh, or external ASV3, you can create private endpoint for your web application. Okay, and that is supported. You have to go in. This is GA. You have to go in and you have to turn this on for your application. And once you turn it on, then you can turn it on from the UI. I have pasted the um, uh, statement that you want to run from CLI. Both some things are fine, but in any case, uh, you can whatever the way you follow, you can then create private endpoints for your application. Okay, any questions on this one? So let's take a look. So once again, I'm going to go into my resource group and sorry. So I have an app service environment v3. This is a v3 app service environment. And if we go into configuration, um, as we have seen in the previous sessions, you have the encryption, upgrade preference, and this is the one I was talking about. You know, turn on the private endpoints. I've already turned on. Normally, it's going to be off. Okay. If it is off, you cannot create private endpoints for your web application. Okay. So you have to turn it on. Once you turn it on, then it takes a few, I mean, probably a minute. Once you do that, then it should be able to, um, uh, you should be able to create private endpoints. Okay? So let's go in and let's take a look at some of the apps that we have created. So once again, I'm going to go back to the UI and take a look. I have this application. And as you can see, let me open this application. And as you can see, this is a web app. I haven't done anything in it, but it is running and it's accessible publicly. You can access it from uh, any place from over the public internet. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to create a private endpoint to it. Okay, I'm going to go into networking and so if you, once again, if that checkbox is not checked, private endpoint will be disabled. But now since the checkbox is checked, that private endpoints are available, we go in and we call it EE, give it a name, because, you know, uh, VNet, I'm going to pick a VNet. Subnet is, okay, which subnet we should pick? Client subnet. And we say, yeah, create a private DNS zone and all. Okay, so we will let it run. So just like the cooking show, I have a already created a private endpoint for an app. So let me go in there. So I have the public web app and I created a private endpoint on top of it. This is the app. And let me try to access this application. Let me browse. As you can see, I cannot access this application here because I'm sitting on my desktop. This is trying to access this application over the public internet. It's saying that, this access to this application is blocked. So now I have created a private endpoint of this application dropped into a VNet. And in that VNet, I have a VM running. So this VM is running in Azure in the same VNet where the private endpoint is. So I'm gonna uh, enter this URL. Here you go. So you can now access this application. So once again, this is kind of best of both worlds. You have an isolated app environment, app service environment that is running inside your application. This is running inside, sorry, in your uh, Azure network. It's an isolated instance, and you have you have deployed the infrastructure in your VNet, but you can host public as well as private websites on top of it. Public means a web application that are accessible over the public internet, and a web apps that you want only your internal environment to access, where you can create a private endpoint, drop it inside, your network which is connected to on-prem, and that's how customers or your consumers, internal consumer, can connect to it. Okay. So any questions? Okay, so let me just quickly do a recap. And pause it, go to this slide deck, and let's do a quick recap. So, as I said before, the two we are talking about we talked about app service environment v3 and some of the key enhancements that have happened. One of them is the ability to migrate from v2 to v3. This is currently in public preview. Just want to clarify. Normally, I mention it's a preview or not. I forgot to type it, but just keep in mind my mistake. This is currently in public preview. Certain scenarios are supported. Since it's in preview, it's only supported in certain regions. And as I said, certain scenarios are supported. You can use either portal or you can use CLI to do that. Okay. Second thing, private endpoint support. This is the ability to create private endpoints for apps that are running in your app service environment. Just keep in mind it's only supported for your public ACE v3 deployment. So if you have, as you know, you can when you deploy your ACE, you can deploy it as public or private. If you do private, you already get a private IP address. Of course, you cannot create private endpoints on top of it, but if you want to create private endpoints, that's where you create a public ACE and then you create private endpoints on top of it. This is helpful in a scenario where you want to host web application on your app service environment, which need to be accessible both from on-prem, uh, both from your internal consumers and without any, who want to access it internally only, or for your consumer who access it uh, over the internet. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Naveed, there's a question on the chat.
Please, Ben. Thank you, Marcelo. Really appreciate it. Go ahead. If you don't mind, can you? I can't see the chat, so if you can repeat the question.
So this is Vinod. So current in number one, ASC v3 is already GA, right? So
yes, ASV3 is GA. Absolutely.
Yeah. So some of the customers, enterprise customers, our big customers, they are saying that uh, it was in the AS app service premium v2, v3, network watcher and flow logs were not supported. That's fine. But if it is coming to ASC v3, where we are injecting the VM in customer subnet, is there any plan to support flow logs?
Yeah, I cannot comment on it. Right now, there is no public information that we share, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's a feedback that is very um, that is heard by, I'm pretty sure, PG team. So please provide the feedback, and as soon as we hear anything publicly, I will share it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Anything else, folks?
This is the internal Microsoft call or it's outsiders also?
This is basically we have audience from our Microsoft team as well as from our customers and partners as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Folks, thank you for joining once more. Just want to let everybody know there won't be any session next week, and we will start from week after as our kind of a goal. And I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend, and folks, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.